My own daughter looked me straight in the eye and said she'd always loved her father more than me. 2 days later, she called me at 3 in the morning, demanding $3,000 to get out of some seedy nightclub. I told her to call Daddy. The police station call I received 12 hours later changed everything I thought I knew about being a good mother. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up raising a 25-year-old woman who thinks I'm her personal ATM while worshiping the man who abandoned us both. Because trust me, this story starts long before that devastating phone call. My name is Patricia Collins, and for the past 7 years, I've been walking on eggshells around my own child. It started when her father, Derek, decided our marriage was suffocating his dreams and moved out to find himself with his 23-year-old secretary. Cliché? Absolutely. Predictable? You bet. Devastating. More than I care to admit. But here's the thing about divorce when you have kids. Suddenly, you're competing for your child's affection with someone who has zero responsibilities and unlimited guilt money. Derek rented a flashy downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river. I kept our modest 3-bedroom house with the mortgage, the memories, and the daily responsibility of actually raising our daughter, Emma, while I was enforcing curfews, checking homework, and saying no to expensive requests. Daddy Dearest was taking Emma to fancy restaurants, buying her designer clothes, and letting her stay out all night, because she's practically an adult. The custody arrangement was supposedly 50-50, but Emma quickly figured out which parent was more fun. Friday afternoons became a routine of watching her pack a weekend bag with genuine excitement, chattering about whatever adventure Derek had planned. Sunday evenings were the reverse. Sullen returns, complaints about my boring house, and constant comparisons to Daddy's exciting life. Dad says I don't need to worry about college debt because he's going to pay for everything, she announced one Tuesday during her senior year, rolling her eyes when I suggested she apply for scholarships as backup. Dad says working part-time during high school is old-fashioned. He wants me to focus on having fun while I'm young. Dad says you're too strict. He never had all these rules growing up. Each conversation felt like a small knife twist, but I kept telling myself it was normal. Divorce was hard on kids. She'd understand when she was older. I just had to be patient and keep being the responsible parent, even if it made me the villain. But the real damage was happening during those weekend visits I wasn't seeing. Derek had turned charm into an art form during our marriage, and now he was using those same skills on Emma. He'd listen to her complaints about my rules with exaggerated sympathy, nodding along as she painted me as an unreasonable tyrant. He'd slip her extra cash because Mom's being cheap again, and take her shopping for things I'd specifically said we couldn't afford. Most insidiously, he'd share just enough of his dating adventures to make Emma feel like his confidant rather than his child. She knew about his girlfriends, his plans to buy a sports car, his dreams of traveling Europe. He treated her like a friend, not a daughter, and she ate it up. Meanwhile, I was still playing the mother role, making sure she did her homework, got to doctor's appointments, learned responsibility. All the unglamorous stuff that nobody thanks you for, but everyone notices if you don't do it. By Emma's college graduation, the battle lines were clearly drawn. She'd majored in art history and moved back home with vague plans to figure things out. Derek supported her creative journey and told her not to rush into anything boring like a career. I gently suggested maybe getting a job while she figured things out, which made me the enemy of dreams everywhere. That's when the real manipulation started. Mom's pressuring me to get some minimum wage job, Emma would tell Derek during their weekly coffee dates. She doesn't understand that I need time to find my passion. Your mom always was practical to a fault, Derek would reply with his trademark concerned frown. Don't let her kill your artistic spirit, sweetheart. I'll help support you while you explore your options. What Emma didn't know was that Derek's support consisted mainly of encouraging words and the occasional fancy dinner. The actual financial support, rent, food, insurance, phone bills, that was still coming from me. But somehow, in Emma's mind, Daddy was the generous one enabling her dreams, while Mommy was the cold-hearted realist trying to crush them. The dynamic reached its peak last month when Emma announced she was planning to move to New York to pursue opportunities in the art world. When I asked about practical details like housing and income, She accused me of being unsupportive. When Derek nodded along to her plans, without offering any actual assistance, he was being encouraging. But I should have seen the breaking point coming. It arrived on a Tuesday evening when I made the mistake of asking Emma to contribute $50 toward groceries since she'd eaten through a week's worth of food in 3 days. $50? She laughed, not looking up from her phone. For what? For the food you eat, the electricity you use, maybe just a token contribution to the household you're living in rent-free. She finally looked at me then, and I saw Derek's expression on her face. That mixture of condescension and amusement that used to make my blood pressure spike during our marriage. Mom, I don't have $50. I'm an artist. This is my creative period. Emma, you're 25 years old. You've been in your creative period for 3 years. That's when she exploded. You know what your problem is, Mom. You've always been jealous that I have a better relationship with Dad than with you. He actually supports my dreams instead of constantly criticizing everything I do. The words hit like a physical blow, but I tried to keep my voice level. Sweetheart, I'm not criticizing your dreams. I'm asking you to help with basic living expenses while you're pursuing them. Dad said you'd react like this. He said you've always resented that I prefer spending time with him. And there it was. The poison Derek had been dripping in her ear for 7 years, finally out in the open. What Emma didn't know was that her precious father had been playing both sides of this game for years. While he was positioning himself as her supportive champion, he'd been systematically undermining every parenting decision I made. The pattern was always the same. I'd establish a boundary or consequence, Emma would complain to Derek, and he'd swoop in as the understanding parent who really got her. But he never actually contradicted me directly. That would require taking real responsibility. Instead, he'd use phrases like, "Well, I understand your mom's perspective, but," or, "Maybe your mom's just stressed about money again." It was death by 1,000 cuts, each conversation slowly eroding Emma's respect for me while positioning Derek as her ally against the unreasonable woman who'd raised her. The weekend after our grocery store argument, Emma went to stay with Derek as usual. I knew she'd spend the entire visit complaining about my unreasonable demands, and Derek would listen with practiced sympathy, maybe even slip her some cash to ease the sting of having such a difficult mother. What I didn't expect was the call I received from Derek himself that Sunday evening. "Patricia, we need to talk about Emma." His voice had that serious, concerned tone he'd perfected during our marriage, the one that always preceded him explaining how I was handling something wrong. "What about Emma? She's really upset about this money situation. You're putting too much pressure on her." I took a deep breath, reminding myself not to engage with his manipulation tactics. "Derek, Emma is 25 years old and has been living in my house rent-free for 3 years. Asking her to contribute $50 toward groceries isn't pressure, it's basic responsibility. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You've always been so rigid about money. Emma's going through a creative period. She needs support, not stress. And what kind of support are you providing exactly?" There was a pause. Derek had always been excellent at offering emotional support and terrible at offering anything practical. "I'm providing emotional encouragement, which is what she needs right now. Not everyone has to turn everything into a transaction, Patricia." "Right. So I handle the transactions while you provide the encouragement. Same arrangement we had during our marriage. Look, I'm calling because I'm worried about Emma. She says you've been making little comments, creating a hostile environment." I almost laughed. Hostile environment? I asked her to buy groceries. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Emma feels like you resent her success. What success, Derek? She graduated 3 years ago and hasn't held a job since. She's exploring her options. Building her portfolio. Not everyone follows the same traditional path you did. There it was. The subtle implication that my approach to life was somehow lesser, more conventional, less enlightened. Derek had been making comments like that throughout our marriage, always with just enough ambiguity that I couldn't call him out directly. "Derek, if you're so concerned about Emma's well-being, perhaps you'd like to contribute to her living expenses. Or better yet, she could move in with you." Another pause. This was always where Derek's supportive father act hit reality. "You know, my living situation isn't set up for long-term guests. And frankly, I think Emma benefits from having stability at home while she figures things out." Translation. He liked playing the fun parent on weekends, but had zero interest in dealing with the day-to-day reality of supporting an adult child. Then I'd suggest you support my efforts to help her become independent, instead of undermining them. Patricia, I'm not undermining anything. I'm just saying maybe there's a gentler approach. Emma's sensitive. Emma was 25 years old and sensitive about being asked to buy groceries. But somehow, this was my fault for being too demanding rather than Derek's fault for enabling her complete lack of responsibility. The conversation ended with Derek suggesting I think about how my approach was affecting Emma's emotional well-being, as if the past 7 years of watching my daughter choose her father over me at every opportunity hadn't already given me plenty to think about. That week, Emma barely spoke to me except to make pointed comments about how some people didn't understand that creativity couldn't be rushed. She started spending even more time at Derek's place, often not coming home until late at night, sometimes not at all. When I asked where she'd been, she'd give vague answers about working on projects or networking with other artists. But her portfolio remained unchanged, and her networking seemed to consist mainly of going to expensive restaurants and clubs with Derek and his rotating cast of 20-something girlfriends. The breaking point came the following Tuesday, exactly a week after our grocery store argument. I'd had a particularly difficult day at work. Budget cuts at the hospital where I worked as a nurse meant longer hours and more stress for everyone. I came home to find Emma in the kitchen, having apparently made herself an elaborate meal using ingredients I'd planned for the entire week. Emma? Those were the groceries for this week. She looked up from her plate with Derek's exact expression of mild annoyance. Mom, I was hungry. I'll replace whatever I used. With what money? Dad said he might give me some spending money this weekend. Might. This weekend. So I should just wait and hope your father follows through on his vague promises while I figure out what to eat for the rest of the week. Emma's eyes narrowed. You know what? I'm tired of walking on eggshells in my own house. Your house? Emma, I pay the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, and apparently all the food. What exactly makes this your house? That's when she stood up, her face flushed with anger that looked eerily familiar. Fine. You want to know how I really feel? I've always loved Dad more than you. You're so annoying with your constant rules and complaints and making everything about money. That's why he left Mom. Because you're exhausting to live with. The words hung in the air between us like poison gas. 7 years of careful manipulation had led to this moment, my own daughter telling me that my husband's abandonment was my fault, and that she'd always preferred the parent who'd actually abandoned her. Emma, your father left because he was having an affair with his secretary. Whatever. At least he's not bitter and controlling like you are. She grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Where are you going? To Dad's, where I'm actually welcome. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the meal she'd made with my groceries, before telling me she'd never loved me as much as the man who saw her twice a week and contributed nothing to her actual well-being. But that night was just the beginning. Emma didn't come home that night, or the next night. On Thursday, I received a text. Staying with Dad for a while. Need space to think. I wanted to call Derek and demand he send her home, but I knew that would only validate Emma's narrative that I was controlling and unreasonable. Besides, part of me wondered if maybe some space would be good for both of us. Maybe she needed time to realize how much I actually did for her. By Saturday, I was questioning everything. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe I had been too focused on practical concerns instead of emotional support. Maybe my approach really was driving Emma away. That's the insidious thing about emotional manipulation. Even when you can see it clearly, it still makes you doubt yourself. Friday came and went without any communication from Emma. I tried to keep busy with work and household tasks, but the silence felt oppressive. Our house had never been particularly lively, but Emma's complete absence left an emptiness that was almost suffocating. Saturday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Going out with friends tonight. Will probably be late. At least she was letting me know her plans, which felt like progress. I went to bed around 11, telling myself that maybe this space was exactly what we both needed. At 3:17 a.m., my phone rang. I jolted awake, my heart immediately racing. Nobody calls at 3 a.m. with good news. The number on my screen was Emma's, but when I answered, the voice that came through was pure panic. Mom, I need help. My card was declined, and they won't let me leave this club, and I need $3,000 right now, or they're going to call the police. I sat up in bed, trying to process what I was hearing through the fog of sleep and adrenaline. Emma, slow down. What club? $3,000 for what? I can't explain everything right now, but I'm at this private club downtown, and I ran up a tab, and now they're saying my card was declined and they want cash payment before I can leave. And Mom, I'm scared. There are these guys here, and they're being really aggressive about the money. My maternal instincts kicked in immediately. Whatever had happened between us, Emma was my daughter, and she was scared. Okay, breathe. What's the name of the club? I'll come get you. No, you can't come here. They said they only want cash, no personal checks or anything like that. Just straight cash, $3,000. Something about her tone was off, the words coming too fast, like she was reading from a script. Emma, $3,000? What kind of club charges $3,000? Mom, please, I can't explain everything right now, but I really need you to send the money. I can pay you back, I promise. Dad said he'd give me some money this weekend, and… Wait, where is your father in all this? There was a pause. In the background, I could hear what sounded like music and conversation, but nothing that suggested Emma was in immediate danger. He's not answering his phone right now. Not answering his phone at 3 in the morning when his daughter needs $3,000? Mom, please, can you just help me? I'll transfer the money to you as soon as I get home, I swear. I looked at the ceiling of my bedroom, the same bedroom I'd shared with Derek before he decided I was too suffocating for his dreams. The same bedroom where I'd cried myself to sleep countless nights after Emma chose him over me. The same bedroom where I'd questioned whether I was really as terrible a mother as they both seemed to think. Emma, you just told me 2 days ago that you've always loved your father more than me because I'm so annoying and exhausting. You said my focus on money and responsibility is why your father left. Now you're calling me at 3 in the morning asking for $3,000 that you'll pay back with money your father might give you this weekend? Mom, this isn't the time for… No, Emma, I think this is exactly the time. You've spent 3 years living in my house rent-free while telling me how unreasonable I am for asking you to contribute $50 toward groceries. You've spent 7 years choosing your father over me every time, despite the fact that I'm the one who's actually supported you financially and emotionally. And now you want me to send you $3,000 at 3 in the morning to get you out of whatever mess you've gotten yourself into? Mom, please, I'm scared. But I wasn't hearing fear anymore. I was hearing manipulation. The same tone Derek used to use when he wanted something from me, making his poor choices my emergency. Emma, here's what you're going to do. You're going to call your father, the one you love more than me, and ask him for $3,000. Since he's been telling you for 7 years that he's so supportive and I'm so unreasonable, this seems like the perfect opportunity for him to prove it. Mom, he's not answering. Then keep calling. Text him. Show up at his apartment. Figure it out. You're 25 years old, and you've made it clear that you don't need my help or my guidance. So don't ask for my money. I can't believe you're doing this to me. For a moment, I almost caved. Almost apologized and asked for the address so I could rush downtown with my credit card and fix whatever mess she'd gotten into. Because that's what I'd been doing for 25 years, fixing things, cleaning up messes, being the responsible parent while Derek got to be the fun one. But then I remembered her face when she told me she'd always loved him more. I remembered 7 years of being undermined and dismissed and treated like an ATM with an attitude problem. Emma, I love you. But I'm not sending you $3,000 at 3 in the morning to solve a problem that your beloved father should be handling. Call Daddy. Ask him for help. Let him prove how supportive he really is. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. But for the first time in years, it wasn't from fear or hurt. It was from the adrenaline of finally saying no to the manipulation that had been controlling my life since Derek left. I turned off my phone and went back to sleep. But I should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. I woke up Saturday morning feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time since Emma had moved back home, my house was quiet, not because she was sulking, but because I'd finally stopped enabling her emotional manipulation. I made coffee in my favorite mug, sat on my back porch, and watched the sunrise. No crisis to manage, no manipulation to navigate. No guilt to carry for someone else's poor choices. Just silence and the realization that I'd been holding my breath for 7 years without realizing it. Around 10 o'clock, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from Emma, 12 text messages ranging from pleading to angry to guilt-inducing, and 3 voicemails I deleted without listening to. Nothing from Derek. Interesting. If Emma had really been in danger, if there had really been aggressive men demanding cash at some seedy club, wouldn't her beloved father have eventually answered his phone? Wouldn't he have rushed to help his precious daughter? The silence from Derek told me everything I needed to know about the legitimacy of Emma's emergency. I spent Saturday doing all the things I'd stopped doing while tiptoeing around Emma's moods. I cleaned the house thoroughly, went grocery shopping without worrying about someone eating a week's worth of food in one sitting, and even called my sister Linda for the first time in months. Patricia, it's so good to hear from you. How are things with Emma? Complicated, but maybe getting less complicated. I didn't go into details, but it felt good to talk to someone who remembered who I was before I became the villain in Derek and Emma's story. Sunday morning brought the call I'd been expecting, though not from who I'd expected. Mrs. Collins, this is Officer Martinez with the Downtown Police Department. I'm calling about your daughter, Emma Collins. My heart stopped. Despite my anger and hurt, Emma was still my child, and the fear that I'd let something terrible happen to her by not sending the money hit me like a physical blow. Is she okay? Was she hurt? She's fine, ma'am, but she's here at the station and she's asked us to call you. At the station? What happened? Ma'am, your daughter was involved in an incident at a private gaming establishment downtown. She accumulated a significant debt and was unable to pay. The establishment filed a complaint when she couldn't settle the account. Gaming establishment. Not a seedy club. Not aggressive men threatening her safety. A casino or illegal gambling operation where Emma had lost money she didn't have. Officer Martinez, can you tell me how much money we're talking about? The complaint lists $3,200. $3,000. Exactly the amount she'd needed me to send at 3 in the morning. Emma hadn't been in danger from threatening men. She'd been in trouble for gambling with money she didn't have. Ma'am, are you able to come down and pick up your daughter? Officer, I have a question. Is my daughter under arrest? No, ma'am. The establishment filed a civil complaint, but we were able to mediate the situation. Your daughter was released on her own recognizance with the understanding that the debt would be settled within 72 hours. And if it's not settled, then it becomes a matter for civil court, possibly criminal court, if fraud charges are filed. I sat down heavily on my couch. Emma had gambled away $3,000, lied to me about being in danger, tried to manipulate me into paying her debts, and was now facing potential fraud charges if the money wasn't paid by Tuesday. Mrs. Collins? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. Officer Martinez, can you tell me if my daughter's father was contacted about this situation? Let me check. Yes, ma'am. Derek Collins was contacted but declined to come to the station. He said he wasn't able to assist with the situation at this time. Of course he did. Derek, the supportive father who understood Emma so much better than her unreasonable mother, had declined to help when his precious daughter was actually in trouble. Mrs. Collins, your daughter is asking to speak with you. Put her on. Emma's voice was small and scared, completely different from the confident woman who'd told me I was too annoying to love just 4 days earlier. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up, but I really need your help. Emma, you lied to me. You told me you were in danger when you'd actually been gambling. I was scared, I panicked, but Mom, if I don't pay this money by Tuesday, they're going to press charges. And where is your father in all this? The one who's so much more supportive than me? Silence. Emma, he said he can't get involved in this kind of situation. He said it would be bad for his business reputation. Derek's business reputation was more important than keeping his daughter out of jail. But somehow I was still the unreasonable parent in this scenario. Mom, please. I know I said terrible things to you, but I really need your help. I'll do anything you want. I'll get a job. I'll pay rent. I'll pay you back every penny. For 7 years, Emma had been Derek's princess, the daughter who preferred his permissive, consequence-free approach to parenting. For 7 years, she'd treated me like an obstacle to overcome rather than a parent to respect. But Derek wasn't answering his phone when she needed $3,000 to stay out of jail. I thought about the woman I'd been before my marriage fell apart. Strong, capable, unwilling to be taken advantage of. I thought about the woman I'd become afterward, constantly second-guessing herself, walking on eggshells, accepting emotional crumbs from her own child. "Mrs. Collins?" Officer Martinez was back on the line. "Your daughter needs to be picked up, and we need to know how this debt situation will be resolved." I looked around my quiet house, my peaceful house, the house that had been stress-free for exactly 48 hours. "Officer Martinez, please tell my daughter that her father will be handling this situation. She should call him and work out the arrangements directly." "Ma'am, I believe she's already tried to contact her father. Then she should try harder. I'm not available to help with this." I hung up the phone and immediately called Derek. He answered on the first ring. "Patricia, I was wondering when you'd call. Your daughter is sitting in a police station because she owes $3,000 to a gambling establishment. The police say you declined to help. This is exactly the kind of situation I was talking about. Emma needs support and understanding, not judgment. Derek, she needs $3,000 to avoid fraud charges. That's not judgment, that's reality. Look, Patricia, I can't just drop everything and rush downtown with a checkbook every time Emma makes a mistake. I have responsibilities. But I can?" Silence. "Derek, for 7 years, you've positioned yourself as the understanding, supportive parent, while I've been the bad guy for trying to teach Emma responsibility. Now she's in real trouble, and you're nowhere to be found. Where's all that support now?" "This is different. This is serious legal trouble." "Exactly. This is what happens when children don't learn consequences. This is what happens when one parent enables and the other parent gets blamed for being realistic." My phone beeped with another call. "Emma, I have to go, Derek. Your daughter is calling me again, probably because her beloved father won't help her." I switched to Emma's call. "Mom, Dad said he can't help me because of his business reputation. Mom, I'm really scared. If I get arrested, I'll have a criminal record. I'll never get a real job." And there it was. The consequences Emma had never had to face before were finally catching up with her, and Derek was nowhere to be found. But then Emma said something that made my blood run cold. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you about what really happened last night." "Mom, the gambling thing, that's not the whole story." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean, Emma?" "I wasn't alone at the casino. I was with Jason." Jason was Derek's latest girlfriend's 26-year-old son, a trust fund kid with a cocaine habit and a taste for expensive trouble. Emma had mentioned him a few times over the past month, always with the kind of breathless excitement that meant she had a crush. "Emma, what does Jason have to do with this?" "He's the one who brought me to the casino. He said he knew people there, that he could get us into the VIP room. He said he'd teach me how to play poker properly." My nurse instincts kicked in. I could hear the shame in her voice, the careful way she was choosing her words. There was more to this story. "Emma, exactly what happened last night. We were playing poker and drinking, and Jason kept saying I was getting better at reading people. He was encouraging me to bet bigger amounts. And I was winning at first, Mom. I was actually winning a lot. But then you started losing. It happened so fast. One hand I was up almost $2,000, and the next hand I lost everything, plus the $3,000 I didn't have." This was sounding less like bad luck and more like a setup. "Emma, where was Jason when you needed the $3,000? Silence. "Emma? He left." "He left? While you were stuck there unable to pay your debt?" "He said he couldn't get involved because his trust fund has restrictions about gambling debts. He said if his family found out he was at an illegal casino, they'd cut him off." So Derek's girlfriend's son had taken Emma to an illegal casino, encouraged her to bet money she didn't have, then abandoned her when the situation went bad. And Derek, who'd been telling me for years that I didn't understand Emma's needs, had refused to help his daughter when she was facing fraud charges. "Mom, I think Jason set me up. I think the whole thing was planned. He kept insisting we go to this specific casino, and he knew exactly which games to play and which dealers to approach. And when I started losing, it was like he'd expected it." My daughter, who'd spent 7 years telling me I was too controlling and suspicious, was finally understanding what real manipulation looked like. "Emma, did you tell the police about Jason's involvement?" I couldn't. If I told them Jason brought me there, he said his family would sue me for defamation. He said they have expensive lawyers and I'd be destroyed financially. so Jason gets to walk away clean while you face potential criminal charges. Mom, I know I've been awful to you. I know I said terrible things, and I chose Dad over you, and I've been ungrateful for everything you've done. But right now, I really need my mother. 7 years of emotional manipulation. 7 years of being treated like a second-class parent. 7 years of watching Derek undermine every boundary I tried to set while positioning himself as the understanding father. And now, when Emma was in real trouble, Derek had vanished, and his girlfriend's son had used my daughter as a pawn in some kind of casino scam. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. How long has your father known about your relationship with Jason? Another pause. This one longer. Emma, he introduced us about 2 months ago. He said Jason was a good guy from a good family and that I should get to know him better. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Derek had introduced Emma to a gambling addict trust fund kid, knowing full well what kind of influence Jason would be. He'd encouraged their relationship, probably enjoying the idea that Emma was dating someone from a wealthy family. And when their relationship led Emma into serious trouble, Derek had disappeared faster than a magic trick. Mom, I know you probably think I deserve this. I know I've been terrible to you. I closed my eyes, thinking about the woman I'd been before Derek's manipulation campaign began, before I started second-guessing every parenting decision, before I became afraid of my own daughter's disapproval. Emma, I don't think you deserve to have criminal charges hanging over your head, but I also don't think I should have to clean up the messes created by your father's judgment about appropriate people for you to date. So you won't help me? I thought about Derek, probably having brunch with his current girlfriend while his daughter sat in a police station. I thought about Jason, safe in his trust fund bubble, while Emma faced fraud charges. I thought about 7 years of being painted as the unreasonable parent, while Derek collected all the credit for being supportive. Emma, I'll help you, but there are going to be conditions. Anything, Mom. I'll do anything. First, you're going to tell me everything about your relationship with Jason and exactly how last night happened. No lies, no omissions, nothing left out. Okay. Second, you're moving back home today and you're getting a job this week. Not eventually. Not when you feel ready, this week. Yes, absolutely. Third, you're going to have a conversation with your father about his role in this situation and his decision to abandon you when you needed help. Mom, I don't think Dad will... Emma, your father introduced you to someone who led you into serious legal trouble, then refused to help when that trouble materialized. If he wants any relationship with you going forward, he's going to have to explain himself. And if he won't? I looked out my kitchen window at the garden I'd planted alone, in the house I'd maintained alone, thinking about the daughter I'd essentially raised alone while Derek played weekend father. Then you'll finally understand the difference between a parent who enables and a parent who actually protects you. I could hear Emma crying on the other end of the line. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything I said and everything I did, and for choosing Dad over you when you were the one taking care of me the whole time. Emma, we'll talk about all of that when you get home. Right now, I need to figure out how to get you out of this mess without destroying my retirement savings. What do you mean? I hadn't told Emma about the second mortgage I'd taken on the house to pay for her college expenses, the ones Derek had promised to cover but never actually contributed to. I hadn't told her about the credit card debt I'd accumulated covering her living expenses while she found herself. I hadn't told her that $3,000 represented a significant chunk of my emergency fund. Never mind. I'll pick you up in an hour. But as I hung up the phone, I realized this situation was bigger than just Emma's gambling debt. Derek had been playing a long game, manipulating both of us for 7 years, and I was beginning to suspect that Emma's trouble with Jason wasn't an accident. It was time to find out exactly what Derek had been planning all along. I discovered my ex-husband had been stealing from our daughter's college fund for 2 years while positioning me as the financially irresponsible parent. When I confronted him with the bank statements, he tried to convince me I was having memory problems. The recording I made of that conversation became evidence in a federal fraud investigation. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. The drive to pick up Emma from the police station gave me time to think, and what I was thinking made my blood pressure spike. Too many things weren't adding up about Derek's behavior over the past few months. When Emma had moved back home 3 years ago, Derek had made a big show of promising to help with her expenses. "She's our daughter, Patricia. We should support her dreams together." But his actual contributions had been minimal. Maybe a dinner here, some spending money there, never anything substantial. Meanwhile, I'd been covering her phone bill, car insurance, medical expenses, and living costs. When I'd asked Derek about his promised support, he'd always had excuses. "Cash flow is tight this month," or "the business has some unexpected expenses." But Derek's lifestyle certainly hadn't reflected any financial struggles. New car, expensive vacations with his rotating girlfriends, designer clothes, that flashy downtown loft. If he was struggling financially, he was hiding it well. At the police station, Emma looked like a scared child rather than the confident young woman who'd told me I was too annoying to love. Her makeup was smeared, her clothes wrinkled, and her usual defiant posture had been replaced by hunched shoulders and nervous fidgeting. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly as we walked to my car. "We'll talk when we get home." The ride was silent except for Emma's occasional sniffles. I wasn't ready to comfort her yet. I needed answers first. Back at the house, I made coffee and sat across from Emma at the kitchen table. Same table where she'd told me she'd always loved her father more. Same table where she'd laughed about contributing $50 to groceries. But this time, the power dynamic was completely different. "Tell me about Jason," I said without preamble. Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee mug like it was a lifeline. "Dad introduced us about 2 months ago. He said Jason's mother was someone he was dating seriously, and that Jason and I might have a lot in common." "What kind of things in common?" "Dad said Jason was also taking time to figure out his life path, that he understood the pressure young people face to rush into careers. He said Jason's family was very successful and understood the value of taking time to make the right decisions." Classic Derek manipulation, making Emma's lack of direction sound sophisticated while connecting her with someone whose family had money. "When did the gambling start?" "About 3 weeks ago. Jason said he knew about private clubs where successful people went to network. He said it wasn't really about the gambling. It was about meeting the right people and learning how business really works." "And you believe that?" Emma's face flushed. "Mom, I know how it sounds now, but Jason seemed so confident, so connected. He talked about these amazing business opportunities and how his family had made their fortune through strategic risk-taking." "Emma, his family made their fortune through inheritance and real estate development. Jason has never held a job in his life." "How do you know that?" I'd spent the morning doing research while Emma was at the police station. Amazing what you can learn about people when you actually look instead of just trusting someone else's characterization. Because unlike your father, I believe in investigating before trusting. "Tell me about last night specifically." Emma took a shaky breath. "Jason picked me up around 8. He said we were going to meet some of his business contacts at an exclusive club. When we got there, it was this upscale place but clearly focused on gambling. Jason seemed to know everyone." "How much money did you start with?" "Jason gave me $500. He said it was a loan to get me started, that I'd pay him back from my winnings." A loan. From a trust fund kid to a woman with no income. Another red flag that Emma had missed. "And you started winning immediately?" "Yes, it was incredible. Within an hour, I was up almost $2,000. Jason kept saying I was a natural, that I had great instincts for reading people." "Emma, you've never played poker before in your life." "I know. That's what made it so exciting. Jason said sometimes beginners have better luck because they're not overthinking things." I had to admire the setup. Get Emma winning immediately, build her confidence, make her think she had natural talent, then encourage bigger and bigger bets until the inevitable crash. When did things change? Around midnight. Jason suggested we move to a higher stakes table. He said the people there were the real business contacts he wanted me to meet. He said if I could hold my own at that table, doors would open for me. And that's when you lost everything. It happened so fast. Mom, one bad hand and everything was gone, plus money I didn't have. And Jason just vanished. He said he was going to the bathroom and never came back. I leaned back in my chair, processing the calculated nature of what had happened to my daughter. This wasn't just bad luck or poor judgment. This was a sophisticated con game. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay. How much does your father know about your finances, your bank account, your credit cards, your lack of income? Emma looked confused by the question. Everything, I guess. We talk about money sometimes. He knows I don't have a job and that you've been supporting me. He knows I don't have any significant savings. Has he ever asked you specific questions about my finances? How much I make? How much I have saved? Whether I own the house outright? Well, yes. Sometimes. He said he was concerned about whether you could afford to support me long term. He said maybe I should find out more about your financial situation so we could plan better. My stomach dropped. Derek hadn't just been manipulating Emma's relationship with me. He'd been gathering financial intelligence through her. Emma, have you ever given your father specific information about my bank accounts, my credit cards, or my financial documents? Mom, why are you asking these questions? Just answer me. Sometimes he'd ask if you seemed stressed about money, or if you'd mentioned anything about financial problems. And once? She trailed off. Once what? Once he asked me to take a picture of a document on your desk. He said it looked like something important, and he wanted to make sure you weren't hiding financial problems that might affect me. What document? It was something from the bank, about the house. Dad said he was worried you might be in trouble with the mortgage and not telling me. I felt like the floor was tilting. Emma, when was this? Maybe 6 months ago? 6 months ago, I'd been reviewing documents related to the second mortgage I'd taken to pay for Emma's college expenses. Expenses Derek had promised to cover but never did. Emma had unknowingly photographed confidential financial documents and sent them to her father. Derek hadn't just been emotionally manipulating us for 7 years. He'd been conducting financial surveillance through our daughter. Mom, you're scaring me. What's wrong? I stood up and walked to my home office. Emma following. I pulled out my filing cabinet and started looking through my financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills, mortgage documents, everything Derek would need to understand my complete financial picture. Emma, I want you to look at something. I pulled out Emma's college expense records. Tuition payments, room and board, books, fees, all paid from my accounts. Total, $127,000 over 4 years. Do you see your father's name anywhere on these documents? Emma scanned the papers, her face growing pale. No. But Mom, Dad said he was contributing. He said he was handling things differently for tax purposes. Emma, your father contributed exactly $0 to your college education. I took out a second mortgage on this house to pay for your school. That can't be right. Dad always talked about how we were both investing in my education. I pulled out more documents, medical expenses, car insurance, phone bills, all the things Derek claimed he was helping with, all paid solely by me. Emma, for the past 3 years, your father has contributed approximately $400 to your actual expenses, dinners and occasional spending money. I've contributed over $40,000. Emma sank into a chair, staring at the documents. But he always talks about supporting me. He always says he believes in investing in my future. Emma, your father's financial support has been almost entirely fictional, but his emotional manipulation has been very real. My phone buzzed. Derek. Patricia, I heard about Emma's situation. We need to talk. Yes, we certainly do. Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon? There are things you need to understand about what really happened last night. Something in his tone set off every alarm bell I had. Derek wanted to meet in person to discuss Emma's gambling incident. The same Derek who'd refused to help his daughter when she was sitting in a police station. Where do you want to meet? How about that cafe on 5th Street? Say, 3 o'clock? I looked at Emma, still staring at the financial documents that proved her beloved father had been lying to her for years. I'll be there. But I wasn't going alone, and I wasn't going unprepared. Because I was beginning to suspect that Emma's gambling disaster wasn't just a coincidence. It was the culmination of a plan Derek had been working on for months. I arrived at the cafe 30 minutes early and chose a corner table with clear sight lines to all entrances. Call it paranoia, but something about Derek's sudden interest in meeting face-to-face felt wrong. In 7 years of Emma-related crises, he'd never once suggested we meet to discuss solutions. Emma had wanted to come with me, but I'd convinced her to stay home. This conversation needed to happen without Derek being able to manipulate her emotions in real time. What Emma didn't know was that I wasn't really alone. My sister Linda was sitting 3 tables away, pretending to read a book, but actually recording everything on her phone. After discovering Derek's financial surveillance campaign, I decided turnabout was fair play. Derek arrived exactly on time, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Expensive suit, perfect hair, that confident smile that had once made me feel lucky to be married to him. Now, it just made me nauseous. "Patricia, thank you for meeting me. You look well." I didn't return the compliment. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Derek. What do you want to talk about?" He ordered coffee and settled into his chair with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent years manipulating people into giving him what he wanted. "I've been thinking about Emma's situation, and I have some concerns about how you're handling it." "How I'm handling it?" "Derek, you refused to help your daughter when she was sitting in a police station facing fraud charges." "That's exactly what I mean. Patricia, you can't just throw money at every problem Emma creates. She needs to learn consequences." I almost choked on my coffee. "Derek, you've spent 7 years undermining every consequence I've ever tried to establish. Every boundary I set, every lesson I tried to teach, every rule I enforced. You've systematically sabotaged all of it by positioning yourself as the understanding parent who gets her better than I do. That's not fair. I've always supported your parenting." "Really? Like when you told Emma that working part-time in high school was old-fashioned? Like when you said my rules about curfew were too strict? Like when you told her not to worry about college debt because you'd handle everything, then contributed nothing?" Derek's confidence flickered slightly. "Patricia, college is expensive. I did what I could." "You did nothing, Derek. I have the bank records. In 4 years, you contributed $0 to Emma's education while telling her you were handling things for tax purposes." "Look, my financial situation is more complicated than you understand." "Is it?" "Because your lifestyle doesn't reflect any financial complications. New car, expensive vacations, designer clothes. Either you're lying about your financial struggles or you're lying about your priorities." Derek leaned forward, his voice dropping to the concerned tone he'd perfected during our marriage. "Patricia, I'm worried about you. You're becoming paranoid, seeing conspiracies where none exist. Emma mentioned that you've been asking strange questions about our conversations, accusing me of gathering information about your finances." There it was, the gaslighting technique he'd used throughout our marriage whenever I questioned his behavior. Make me doubt my own perceptions by suggesting I was being irrational. "Derek, Emma photographed my mortgage documents and sent them to you 6 months ago at your request. That's not paranoia. That's fact." His mask slipped completely for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating in his expression before he recovered. "Patricia, Emma misunderstood what I was asking for. I was concerned about your financial stability because I wanted to make sure you could continue supporting her. Concerned enough to have her secretly photograph confidential financial documents, but not concerned enough to contribute to her support yourself. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're twisting everything into some kind of conspiracy theory." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app, making sure Derek could see what I was doing. "Derek, let's talk about Jason." "What about him?" "You introduced Emma to a gambling addict trust fund kid who led her to an illegal casino and abandoned her when she got in trouble. Either you have terrible judgment about appropriate people for our daughter to date, or this was intentional. That's ridiculous. Jason comes from a good family. Jason comes from a family with money, which isn't the same thing. And you knew about his gambling problems when you introduced them." Derek's jaw tightened. "How could I have known that?" "Because Jason's mother is Sandra Martinez, the real estate agent you've been dating for 6 months. And 3 months ago, Sandra asked you for advice about Jason's gambling debts because she knew you work in finance. She told Emma all about it yesterday when Emma called her looking for Jason. This was a lie, but Derek didn't know that. I wanted to see how he'd react to being caught in his web of deception." His face went completely white. "Patricia, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. These accusations are becoming delusional. Derek, yesterday you refused to help your daughter when she was in police custody. Today, you're sitting here trying to convince me I'm delusional for asking why you introduced her to someone you knew would get her in trouble. What exactly is your endgame here?" "My endgame? Patricia, My endgame is helping Emma become an independent adult instead of enabling her dependence on you. By having her accumulate $3,000 in gambling debt, Emma made her own choices. She's 25 years old. Emma made choices based on information you provided and introductions you made. You set this situation in motion. Derek stood up abruptly. Patricia, I came here hoping we could work together to help Emma, but you're clearly not in a mental state to have a rational conversation. Sit down. Derek. Something in my voice made him hesitate. Sit down, or I'm going to start asking very loud questions about why you introduced your daughter to a gambling addict, then refused to help when that relationship led to her facing fraud charges. He sat down, but his whole demeanor had changed. The charming mask was completely gone, replaced by something much uglier. What do you want, Patricia? I want the truth about what you've been planning. I want to know why you've spent 7 years turning our daughter against me while gathering information about my finances through her. I want to know why you introduced her to Jason. And I want to know what you thought was going to happen when she got in trouble. Derek was silent for a long moment, clearly calculating his next move. Finally he spoke, and his voice was completely different, cold, calculating, stripped of all pretense. Patricia, you've been living beyond your means for years, taking out a second mortgage to pay for Emma's college, accumulating credit card debt to support her lifestyle, depleting your retirement savings to maintain a standard of living you can't afford. Emma's gambling debt is just the latest in a series of financial crises that are going to destroy you. And you know this how? Because I've been watching. Because Emma tells me everything about your financial stress, your late-night worry sessions, your conversations about money. You're drowning, Patricia, and you're too proud to admit it. So your solution was to make things worse by introducing Emma to a gambling addict? Derek smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I'd ever seen on his face. My solution was to help you see that you can't afford to support Emma anymore, that she needs to become someone else's responsibility. Someone else's responsibility? Derek, she's your daughter. She's a 25-year-old adult who needs to learn that her mother can't solve all her problems with money she doesn't have. I stared at him, finally understanding the scope of what he'd been doing. Derek, you've been systematically destroying Emma's relationship with me while gathering intelligence about my finances. You introduced her to Jason knowing he'd get her in trouble, then refused to help when that trouble materialized. You wanted me to exhaust my savings paying her gambling debt. I wanted you to realize you can't afford to keep enabling her. No. You wanted me financially destroyed so that Emma would have to turn to you for support. Except you have no intention of actually supporting her, do you? Derek's silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Got it all. Sending copies to cloud storage now. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. Derek, you've just confessed to financial manipulation and elder abuse while being recorded. I think our conversation is finished. His face went dead white as the implications hit him. Patricia, you can't. Actually, I can. And I am. I walked out of the cafe, leaving Derek to contemplate the wreckage of his carefully planned manipulation campaign. But I wasn't done yet, because Emma deserved to hear exactly what her beloved father had really been planning for both of us. When I got home, Emma was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by financial documents, her face streaked with tears. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw something I hadn't seen in 7 years. My daughter actually seeing me as her mother instead of her enemy. Mom, I've been going through everything. All the college payments, the insurance, the medical bills. You paid for everything, didn't you? I sat down across from her. Yes, sweetheart, I did. And Dad contributed nothing. Essentially nothing. Emma picked up one of the bank statements. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you ever correct me when I said Dad was so supportive? Because you wouldn't have believed me. And because I hoped that eventually you'd see the truth for yourself. I was so awful to you. I said such terrible things. Emma, you said those things because you were being manipulated by an expert. Your father has been playing a very long game. What do you mean? I told her about the cafe meeting, about Derek's admission that he'd been watching my finances through her, about his confession that Emma's introduction to Jason had been intentional. Emma's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, then growing horror as the pieces fell into place. He wanted me to get in trouble so you'd go broke paying for it? That's exactly what he wanted. And when I couldn't afford to support you anymore, you'd have to turn to him. But he wouldn't actually help me. No, sweetheart, he's never helped you. He's just convinced you that he was helping, while I was actually doing the work. Emma was quiet for a long time, processing the systematic nature of the deception she'd been living under. Mom, there's something else, something I didn't tell you about last night. What? Before we went to the casino, Jason took me to dinner at this expensive restaurant. He said we were meeting his mother and her boyfriend there. Derek and Sandra? Yes. And during dinner, Derek kept asking me questions about your health, whether you seemed forgetful lately, whether you'd been making any unusual financial decisions. My blood ran cold. What kind of questions about my health? Whether you'd been repeating yourself, whether you seemed confused about dates or appointments, whether you'd been acting differently since Grandma died. My mother had died 6 months ago, the same time frame when Derek had started asking Emma to photograph my financial documents. Emma, what did you tell him? I said you seemed fine, maybe a little stressed about money, but nothing unusual. But Mom, why would he be asking those questions? I had a terrible suspicion about where Derek's plan had been heading, but I needed to confirm it. Emma, I want you to think carefully. Has your father ever mentioned anything about elder care, or what happens when older people can't manage their finances anymore? Actually, yes. About a month ago, he was telling me about Sandra's father, who has dementia. He said sometimes families have to step in and take control of an elderly person's finances if they're no longer capable of making good decisions. Did he say anything specific about how that process works? He said it involves going to court and having the person declared incompetent. He said it's a legal process designed to protect vulnerable elderly people from making financial mistakes that could destroy their security. The full scope of Derek's plan hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't just been planning to bankrupt me through Emma's financial crises. He'd been building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could take control of my finances entirely. Mom, you look like you're going to be sick. Emma, your father wasn't just trying to destroy my finances. He was building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could gain legal control over my assets. That's insane. Why would he want to do that? I thought about our divorce settlement, about the alimony payments that had stopped 2 years ago, about the retirement accounts and life insurance policies that still listed Derek as beneficiary because I'd never gotten around to changing them. Emma, if something happened to me, or if I was declared incompetent, your father would benefit significantly from my financial assets. Emma stared at me in horror. Mom, are you saying Dad was trying to steal from you? I'm saying your father has been running a very sophisticated long-term con game designed to either bankrupt me or gain legal control over my assets. Emma's gambling debt was just the latest move in a much bigger plan. Emma stood up abruptly and started pacing. This is unbelievable. He's my father. He's supposed to protect me, not use me as a weapon against my own mother. Emma, I need to ask you something else. Has your father ever asked you to sign any documents? Papers, he said, were for insurance purposes, or emergency contacts, or anything like that. Emma stopped pacing, her face going pale. Last month he had me sign something he said was for his life insurance policy. He said he wanted to make sure I was listed as a contact person in case anything happened to him. Do you remember what the document looked like? What company it was from? It wasn't from an insurance company. It was from a law office. My heart started pounding. What kind of law office? Something about elder law and family services. Mom, what did I sign? I grabbed my laptop and started searching for elder law attorneys in our area. It took me less than 5 minutes to find what I was looking for, a law firm that specialized in competency hearings and conservatorship cases. Emma, I think your father had you sign a document supporting a competency challenge against me. What does that mean? It means he was building a legal case to have me declared mentally incompetent, and he used you as a witness to my supposed incapacity. Emma sank back into her chair, the full weight of her father's betrayal hitting her. He used me to spy on you, to gather information about your finances, and to build a legal case against you, all while convincing me that you were the problem in my life. Yes, and if his plan had worked, what would have happened to me? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw someone who was finally understanding the difference between manipulation and love. Emma, if your father had gained control of my assets, you would have discovered that he had no intention of actually supporting you. You would have been left with nothing while he disappeared with my money. But I'm his daughter. Sweetheart, your father has spent 7 years proving that his relationship with you is transactional. He's never contributed to your actual well-being, only to your perception of him as the good parent. Once he no longer needed you as a weapon against me, you would have become just another inconvenience. Emma was crying now. Not the manipulative tears she'd used for years to get her way, but genuine grief for the father she'd thought she had. Mom, how do we stop him? I thought about Linda's recording from the cafe, about the document Emma had unknowingly signed, about the pattern of financial manipulation Derek had admitted to. Emma, we're going to do exactly what your father taught you to do. We're going to gather evidence, build a case, and take legal action to protect ourselves? You mean like fight back? I looked at my daughter, finally seeing the woman she could become instead of the child she'd been manipulated into remaining. Emma, we're not just going to fight back. We're going to destroy his ability to hurt anyone else the way he hurt us. Because Derek had made one crucial mistake in his elaborate manipulation campaign. He'd underestimated exactly how dangerous a protective mother could become when someone threatened her child. The law office of Patterson, Chen and Associates specialized in elder law, but they also handled fraud cases involving financial manipulation of vulnerable adults. When I called Monday morning and explained the situation, they agreed to see Emma and me that afternoon. Richard Patterson was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and the sort of calm demeanor that probably served him well when dealing with family crises. He listened to our story without interruption, occasionally taking notes, his expression growing more serious as the details unfolded. Mrs. Collins, what you're describing is a sophisticated pattern of financial abuse combined with attempted legal manipulation. This is significantly more serious than a simple divorce dispute. How serious? Emma asked. If we can prove what you've described, your father could face federal fraud charges, potential conspiracy charges, and certainly civil liability for financial damages. Richard pulled out a legal pad and started making a list. Let's go through what we have. First, we have evidence that Mr. Collins systematically misrepresented his financial contributions to Emma's education and living expenses while gathering intelligence about Mrs. Collins' finances through their daughter. Emma photographed my mortgage documents at his request, I confirmed. Second, we have Mr. Collins' admission, recorded without his knowledge, that he intentionally introduced Emma to someone he knew would get her in trouble financially. He said Emma needed to learn that I couldn't solve all her problems with money I didn't have, I said. Third, we have evidence that Mr. Collins has been building a competency case against you while using Emma as an unwitting witness to your supposed mental incapacity. Emma pulled out the document she'd signed. I brought the paper he had me sign. I didn't know what it was at the time. Richard examined the document, his expression darkening. This is an affidavit attesting to your mother's inability to manage her financial affairs responsibly. Emma, your signature on this document could have been used to support a competency hearing. A competency hearing would have given Derek legal control over my finances? I asked. If successful, yes. He could have been appointed as your conservator, giving him complete control over your assets, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Emma looked like she was going to be sick. I almost helped him steal everything from my own mother. Emma, you were manipulated by someone who's been perfecting these techniques for years. This isn't your fault. Richard set down the affidavit and looked at both of us seriously. Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to file for a restraining order preventing Mr. Collins from having any access to your financial accounts or legal documents. Second, we're going to report this to Adult Protective Services as a case of attempted elder financial abuse. Elder abuse? But I'm only 52. Mrs. Collins, financial manipulation of adults by family members falls under elder protection statutes regardless of age. And third, we're going to file a civil lawsuit for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy. What about criminal charges? Emma asked. That's up to the district attorney, but I'll be recommending they investigate. The use of an illegal gambling operation to manipulate a victim into debt could constitute federal fraud charges. As we left the law office, Emma was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. Mom, I keep thinking about all the times I chose Dad over you. All the times I believed his version of events instead of trusting you. How could I have been so blind? Emma, your father is a professional manipulator. He's been practicing these techniques for decades. You were a child when he started working on you, and children are programmed to trust their parents. But I'm 25 now. I should have seen through it. Sweetheart, abuse victims often can't see the abuse while it's happening. That's how abuse works. It distorts your perception of reality so gradually that you don't notice until it's almost too late. We drove home in silence, both of us processing the magnitude of what Derek had attempted. That evening, as we were going through more financial documents to prepare for the legal proceedings, Emma's phone rang. "Derek, don't answer it," I said. "Actually, Mom, I think I should. Richard said we need more evidence of his manipulation techniques." Emma answered the phone and immediately put it on speaker. "Emma, sweetheart, how are you feeling today? I've been worried about you since yesterday." His voice was warm, concerned, the perfect portrayal of a caring father. If I hadn't heard him confess to financial manipulation 12 hours earlier, I might have been convinced. "I'm okay, Dad. Mom and I have been talking about everything that happened. I'm glad to hear that. Emma, I want you to know that whatever your mother has told you about our conversation yesterday, she's not interpreting things correctly." "What do you mean?" "Sweetheart, I'm concerned that your mother is having some cognitive issues. The accusations she's been making, the paranoid interpretations of normal conversations, these could be signs of early dementia." Emma's eyes widened, but she kept her voice steady. "Dad, what kind of cognitive issues? Memory problems? Confusion about financial matters? Paranoid thinking about people trying to take advantage of her?" "Emma, these are classic symptoms of age-related cognitive decline." "But Dad, Mom seems fine to me." "That's because you live with her every day, so you don't notice the gradual changes." "Emma, I think your mother needs professional help, and I think you might need to consider whether she's still capable of managing her own affairs." There it was, Derek trying to convince Emma that I was mentally incompetent while positioning himself as the concerned ex-husband looking out for everyone's best interests. "Dad, what do you think should happen?" "I think we need to have your mother evaluated by a professional. If she's developing dementia, she could be vulnerable to financial scams or poor decision-making. We might need to consider legal guardianship to protect her." Emma mouthed, "Oh my God," while Derek continued his pitch for taking control of my life. "Emma, I know this is difficult to think about, but we have to consider your mother's safety and financial security. If she's not competent to manage her own affairs, someone needs to step in before she loses everything." "And you think that someone should be you?" "I think that someone should be family members who care about her well-being." "Emma, I've been married to your mother. I understand her financial habits, her medical history, her support systems. I'm probably the most qualified person to help her through this difficult time." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Derek was trying to convince Emma that stealing my assets would actually be helping me. "Dad, I need to think about all this." "Of course, sweetheart. But Emma, don't wait too long. Every day that your mother goes without proper supervision is another day she could make a financial decision that destroys her security." After Derek hung up, Emma and I sat in stunned silence. "Mom, he just tried to convince me to help him have you declared incompetent. And he made it sound like he'd be doing me a favor. How many other people has he done this to?" That was a question I hadn't considered, but it sent chills down my spine. Derek's manipulation techniques were too sophisticated, too practiced. We probably weren't his first victims. My phone rang. "Linda, Patricia, you need to turn on Channel 7 News right now." I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news station. The anchor was reading a story about a federal investigation into elder financial abuse involving illegal gambling operations, targeting vulnerable adults through family members, then using gambling debt to manipulate victims into transferring assets to perpetrators. 3 suspects have been arrested in connection with the scheme, including Jason Martinez, son of local real estate agent Sandra Martinez. Emma and I looked at each other in shock. "Mom, they arrested Jason." The news story continued. "FBI investigators are asking anyone who believes they or their family members may have been targeted by this scheme to contact the Federal Elder Abuse Hotline." My phone rang again. This time it was Derek. Emma started to reach for it, but I stopped her. "Let it go to voicemail." We listened as Derek's voice filled the room, but this time there was no charm, no warmth, no manipulation, just desperation. "Patricia, we need to talk immediately. There are things happening that you don't understand. Call me back as soon as you get this message." Emma looked at me. "Mom, what do we do now?" I thought about 7 years of manipulation, 7 years of being painted as the unreasonable parent while Derek collected credit for being supportive. I thought about the systematic way he'd used our daughter to gather intelligence about my finances. I thought about the competency case he'd been building to steal my assets. Now, sweetheart, we let the FBI handle Derek while we focus on rebuilding our relationship. Because the most satisfying revenge against Derek's manipulation campaign wasn't legal justice, though that would be nice. It was the fact that his elaborate plan to turn Emma against me had ultimately backfired, bringing us closer together than we'd been in years. 6 months later, I was sitting in a federal courtroom watching Derek being sentenced to 8 years in prison for elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and organized criminal activity. The FBI investigation had uncovered a network of financial predators who specialized in targeting single mothers and divorced women through their adult children. Derek hadn't been the mastermind. That honor belonged to Sandra Martinez and her son Jason, but he'd been a willing and enthusiastic participant in a scheme that had victimized dozens of families over the past 5 years. Emma sat beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand during the more difficult testimony. Watching your father being led away in handcuffs is traumatic, even when you know he deserves it. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patterson. As the judge entered the courtroom, I reflected on how much had changed since that awful night when Emma called me at 3 in the morning demanding money. The Emma sitting beside me now had a job. She'd started working at an art therapy center for trauma survivors 3 months ago, and discovered she had a genuine talent for helping people process difficult emotions through creative expression. She was still living at home, but now she was contributing to household expenses and saving money for her own apartment. More importantly, she'd become someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with, instead of someone I was constantly walking on eggshells around. The therapy had helped both of us understand the depth of Derek's manipulation campaign. Dr. Sarah Chen specialized in family trauma caused by narcissistic abuse, and she'd helped us see that what we'd experienced wasn't just a difficult divorce. It was systematic psychological warfare designed to isolate me from my daughter while positioning Derek to exploit both of us financially. "Emma, you were conditioned from childhood to see your mother as the obstacle to your happiness," Dr. Chen had explained during one of our joint sessions. "Your father spent years teaching you that love meant getting what you wanted without consequences, while responsibility and boundaries meant rejection and cruelty." "But why?" Emma had asked. "Why would he want to destroy our relationship? Because as long as you and your mother were in conflict, neither of you would notice what he was actually doing. He used your relationship as a smokescreen while he gathered intelligence and built his legal case." The therapy had also helped Emma understand that her attraction to Jason hadn't been accidental. Derek had specifically chosen someone who would appeal to her desire for excitement and rebellion while leading her into exactly the kind of trouble that would require expensive solutions. "Mom," Emma had said one evening about a month after Derek's arrest, "I keep thinking about all the times I chose him over you, all the times I believed his version of events instead of listening to you. Emma, you were a child when his manipulation started. Children trust their parents, even when those parents don't deserve trust. But I'm an adult now. I should have seen through it. Sweetheart, abuse survivors often can't see the abuse while it's happening. That's how abuse works. It distorts your perception so gradually that you adapt to it without realizing what's happening." Now, watching Derek being sentenced, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity, not for the consequences he was facing. Those were entirely deserved, but for the man who'd chosen manipulation and exploitation over genuine relationships with the people who'd loved him. The defendant will serve 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Additionally, the court orders restitution in the amount of $847,000 to be distributed among the victims of this conspiracy. Derek's portion of the restitution wouldn't be substantial. Most of his assets had been seized during the investigation, but the symbolic value was important. His crimes had been officially recognized, and his victims had been validated. After the sentencing, Emma and I walked out of the courthouse together. "How do you feel?" I asked her. "Sad, relieved, angry, grateful, all at the same time. I understood exactly what she meant. The past 6 months had been a process of rebuilding, not just our relationship, but our understanding of what healthy relationships looked like. Emma had needed to learn that love and support didn't mean getting everything she wanted without consequences. I had needed to learn that being a protective mother didn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Mom, I want to say something. What's that? Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I was awful to you, even when I chose Dad over you every time, even when I said those terrible things about loving him more than you never stopped being my mother. Emma, you're my daughter. That doesn't change because you made some poor choices or because someone manipulated you into those choices. But you could have let me figure it out on my own. When I called you from the police station, you could have said, "Call your father," and left it at that. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Emma, if I had done that, you might have ended up in jail while Derek disappeared with my assets. You might have been completely alone with no family support and a criminal record. I wasn't going to let that happen to you, even if you didn't appreciate the help at the time. That's what I mean about you being a real mother. Dad talked about supporting me, but when I actually needed help, he vanished. You showed up. We stood outside the courthouse, both of us crying a little, both of us finally understanding the difference between manipulation and love. Mom, I have something to tell you. What? I've been thinking about going back to school, art therapy. After working at the center, I realized I want to help other people who've been through trauma like we have. Emma, that's wonderful. What would you need to make that happen? Probably 2 years of graduate school. It would be expensive, and I'd need to keep working part-time to help with living expenses. I thought about the restitution money that would eventually come from Derek's sentence, about the second mortgage I'd finally paid off, about the retirement savings I'd managed to rebuild over the past 6 months. Emma, I think we can make that work, but this time, we're going to do it differently. What do you mean? I mean, we're going to create a realistic budget, you're going to contribute what you can, and we're going to treat this as an investment in your future rather than a gift with no strings attached. Emma smiled, the first genuine, uncomplicated smile I'd seen from her in years. You mean like a partnership between adults instead of a parent-child transaction? Exactly like that. As we walked to our car, I realized that Derek's manipulation campaign had ultimately failed in the most fundamental way possible. He'd intended to destroy my relationship with Emma while positioning himself as the preferred parent. Instead, his schemes had been exposed. He was facing years in prison, and Emma and I were closer than we'd ever been. Mom, do you think Dad will ever understand what he did wrong? I thought about Derek's complete lack of remorse during the trial, his continued insistence that he'd been trying to help everyone, his inability to see his victims as anything more than obstacles to overcome. No, sweetheart, I don't think he will. But that's okay, because his understanding isn't necessary for our healing. What do you mean? I mean, we don't need Derek to apologize or change or acknowledge his mistakes for us to move forward with our lives. We've learned to recognize manipulation. We've rebuilt trust between us, and we've created a relationship based on honesty instead of emotional blackmail. Emma was quiet for a moment as we got in the car. Mom, I love you. Really love you. Not the manipulated version I convinced myself was love when I was choosing Dad over you. I love you too, Emma, and I'm proud of the woman you're becoming. As we drove home together, I thought about the woman I'd been 7 years ago, constantly second-guessing herself, afraid of her own daughter's disapproval, walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. That woman had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned to trust her instincts and protect herself from manipulation. Someone who discovered that real love sometimes means saying no to people you care about. Derek had spent 7 years trying to isolate me from my daughter and steal my assets. Instead, he'd taught both of us the difference between manipulation and love. And that, I thought, as Emma chatted about her graduate school plans, was the most satisfying revenge of all. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.